Welcome to Doing the Most, the series where we talk about the misadventures of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Georgie, execution strategist and serial entrepreneur. This series is here to get real about what entrepreneurial life truly looks like. We are driven, persistent, hardworking, ambitious. We are human, and these are our stories. Welcome back to Doing the Most, the misadventures of entrepreneurship. Today, our special guest, Simone Kotraba, is going to be telling us about her entrepreneurial journey. And actually, I should say Dr. Kotraba. So she's going to talk about how she, what made her become a doctor, how has her life shifted as an entrepreneur, and like the work that she's doing. So to start off, Simone, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of how you got here?
Yeah, so I would say, yes, I'm a mom. That's like my number one priority, being a mom. I'm a mom of twins.
Nice.
And, being a woman, that's a big deal. And just being, I grew up in the Caribbean, similar to you, like in Jamaica. And I think that's where my journey began, being an entrepreneur. That's where the journey begins. I think for every Caribbean woman, that's where it starts. Yeah, so ebbs and flows throughout life, but I think right now I'm most proud of being a mom and really, still going through this journey that I'm on. It's an ongoing process. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, tell me about what growing up in the Caribbean, growing up in Jamaica, inside of that like entrepreneurial side of you, like what did you experience growing up?
Yeah, so definitely, always my family always had like a shop. A shop or a grocery store, some side business, always multiple businesses. I know you can relate, right? Multiple businesses. And I've always worked in those businesses. Like in my dad's shop, I was like the manager, the leader, as a young child. I remember being 8 years old and being responsible for getting up early and opening the shop and serving the community, which was like such an amazing experience to have. And I think that's really, it's been in my blood. It's part of my DNA. It's part of my DNA. And I've tried many other avenues, which we'll share here. And I ended up back on this journey. So I think for me, it's meant to be. That's what I'm meant to be doing, right? Being an entrepreneur.
Nice. And so, about when did you immigrate from Jamaica, and like what was that process like?
Sure. So yeah, I came here in the States when I was 14. And the process was, my mom moved here with two of my siblings. Was challenging because, miss all my friends and all the community, and the culture is different, right? But once I got here, living in Crown Heights and like hanging out in Flatbush, it's like a mini Caribbean. So then everything kind of remained the same, except like the structure of schooling was different for me. Where, it's like you're free, you don't have to wear uniforms. You could go to school any hell way. In the Caribbean, that's not happening, right?
Nope.
And yeah, one thing that surprised me too here was the way the students talk to the teachers. That was shocking because back then, you can't do that. Otherwise there would be trouble.
You get knocked down. Let's just be honest.
Yes,
you get knocked down.
Yes.
Let's not even sugarcoat it for them. You will be knocked out. Physical punishment. And times have changed, and that's different countries. So anyone that's catching a like fit, oh my God, don't hit children. Like, no, that's just what we grew up in, and that's just how it worked. So
yes,
it was a whole different shift when you came here.
Yeah, so that was a big shift for me. And my mom growing up, like I said, my family had a shop. My dad had a shop. My mom worked there. We all worked there. So coming here, my mom had to work outside of the house. So that was different, right? Where we used to be able to go home for lunch in Jamaica. Now you had to, go into the cafeteria because mom was at work, right? And I think too, I found different that my mom was working as a single mom, right? Working a lot of hours. And prior to that, I had full access to my mom, right? So that was really different. That was like a culture shock. Like, why is mom not home, right? Yeah. So those were the shocks for me. And just like schooling was a big shock, how kids behaved. And, for me, I knew that my only way out of, the situation, right, was just to get an education. So I was focused. I was like laser focused. on getting educated and doing the best that I could do, right? Despite all the violence around me and all the situations, you know, Brooklyn back then is not Brooklyn today, right? Let's face it.
It's not.
It's not. It was rough for kids back then. Yeah. So that was kind of my experience with the transition. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, you know, you got here, you had to kind of like figure out where you belong in this like new ecosystem and just like what was important to you. And like, I want to talk a little bit about like a dynamic shift that I experienced. And I'm not sure how many other people have experienced it, where you said, you know, you're so used to your mom kind of like being home and then she just help with like the shopping stuff. And so you had like a more accessibility to her. So what did that shift in your brain as to like what you wanted to do for work, right? So now you saw like this single mom kind of like just out there working, and you saw like how that impacted you and your siblings, because now it's like less accessibility to her. It sounded like you were one of like a little bit older compared to most of your siblings. So like what responsibility or just like mindset shift did that like instill in you? Like what did you now have to do to make sure that either you weren't in that position or you were able to help her out of that position? Like what were you thinking?
Yeah. So for me, I'm the middle child of like 5 kids, because a lot of us. So I, you know, and being the middle child, I was like the oldest, right? So I was very responsible from early on. And I think my duties as being in the shop kind of transitioned to when I got here, because instead of being in the shop, I was helping with my siblings. Like I had a younger brother who was like 2 years old, a long story. And my younger sister, you know, I had to like, you know, kind of help with them, do homework and with my younger sister and help babysit my younger brother and do all that stuff, cooking and all the household duties that you do to help your parents out. So that was a lot of responsibility for me. And then my mom, other kids' mom would go to like parent teacher conferences, and I used to play basketball, and my mom could never make it because she's always working, right? So that was a big adjustment. Yeah.
And so like what did you then like kind of, you know, as kids, like we tell ourselves like these stories essentially like I must never have this type of job. So like what were you kind of telling yourself, and like ideologies that you were forming within yourself at that time when these things were happening?
Yeah, so my mom was a nanny, right? So I told myself I am not being a nanny, right? I'm not taking care of anybody's children. I am not working long hours. I want to work the hours that I want to work, and I'm going to get an education because that's the only way. Right? At the time, my brain and, you know, being programmed to think that was the only way to be successful is to get an education, so that way you don't have to work for anybody else. You could work for yourself. I mean, I didn't have a clue, but I just went with that, right? And I just was telling myself, I'm not doing that. And I ended up getting a job and you know, Jamaicans, right? Like we have to have 7 jobs, right?
10 jobs. Yep.
Yes.
Stressful.
So yes, stressful. Exactly. Yeah. So I did that. Like, I'm going to work now as I'm young, I'm going to go to school. So when I'm older, I don't have to deal with all that stuff my mom is going through, but it never works out that way.
And so now, you know, what made you decide? So like after you graduated high school, like where did you end up going for college? And like, you know, you had these entrepreneurial trainings from when you were like really young. So did any of that like kind of stay with you through that time, or was it more so like get educated, start my own company, or like work for somebody else and then start my own company? Like what was like that path that led you to entrepreneurship, like after you finished like school, like high school? Like what was like the first degree that you went on to get, and like why?
Yeah, so sure. So in high school, I majored in business. And then when I graduated high school, I went to college in Staten Island, and I majored in like education, right? Because, you know, I didn't know why. I was told I needed to be educated. So I just became a teacher. So I became a teacher, became a teacher. And right after college, I didn't go right directly into teaching. I took like a year off to figure out what I wanted to do, but I started working as a consultant with like different companies, teaching kids with autism. And I did that for a while. And then I went into full-time into teaching, because I thought, everyone says, you need to get a pension, you need to get health benefits. And
401k.
my little mind was like, yeah, I need to do that. And I really didn't like it, because I don't like restrictions. I don't like hours, right? Like I have to be here at a certain time, leave at a certain time. I don't like to be bossed around. So yeah.
I hear it.
Yeah. So that was tricky. And then I went to graduate school, and then after graduate school I was still teaching, and then I quit my teaching job, and then I started my own company. I know. And I was like a full-blown consultant for like 7 years. I was like working with school districts and families and helping, kids with behavioral issues and all that stuff. And I loved that. That was great. And then I decided, oh, let me go get my doctorate. So when I did that, I'm like, oh, I want to be a professor now, and I'm telling you, I was just like in this cycle of wanted freedom, but I didn't know how to get freedom, right? I just kept hearing you need a pension, you need security, and being an entrepreneur, that's not going to get you anywhere. You need more stability. So I kind of listened to society and the culture that I was around and continue in education. And then recently I was a vice principal in Boston Public Schools, like for 3 years. And I decided, okay, I'm done. It's time to go out on your own and do the things that you love to do. And it was not an easy journey because I have twins, right? I have young kids, I'm married, I have a wife, and security is important in our culture. And it was not easy. I actually took a year off because I was like feeling depressed and out of alignment with who I truly am. And I really was suffering, to be honest. I was suffering on the inside because people wanted me to, and encouraged me, oh, become the principal of the school and then you'll feel better. Things will be a lot better. And I knew that wasn't the road for me. So I was really struggling emotionally. So I ended up getting a coach to help me through this process. So I went to Tony Robbins and I walked on fire, and then I came back. I'm like, yes, life will never be the same. And it was, even with a coach, I was still struggling. I didn't know if I wanted to go back to teaching, go back to being a professor, go back to education, to safety, right? To safety. So I decided I'm going to write a curriculum for schools. And I was writing a curriculum for schools, and I was still suffering because there was something still missing. I'm like, I didn't know what was missing. And I got another coach. A
lot of coaches.
Yes. I went through this process where I'm like, I need help. And I kept going through this process because I thought I needed help to figure out what I needed to do, because I didn't want to go back to that institution. And then I decided, so it will be a year now. I decided, oh my God, after going through all the coaching, I decided, oh my God, I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to help people because I, like transitioning from career, being a mom, all this stuff, like other women were stuck and suffering the same as me. And I wanted to help them get unstuck and stop suffering. So I just one day woke up and said, I wanted to do that. And I said to my wife, oh my God, I'm going to coach. And she's like, yes, you are a coach. Of course you are. Do that, So it wasn't a planned thing. And I'm still going through it, right? Because through the coaching process, I realized that I'm attracting different people, different things, different situations where it's not always a smooth road, right? It's like I'm helping other people, but I'm also helping myself, right? For me, my coaching is almost a year since I've been really on my own now. And it's taken on many different, layers, right? I started working with women like on self-image, and then I realized that women had a lot of issues with money. So I moved away. So I started working on self-image and money because that's a topic that many people don't want to talk about. It's a fact that we all want to have money, right? We want to help people. So we need to have lots of money to help people, but how do we do that, right? And we have beliefs about money that really keeps us struggling and stuck and, through the journey, basically. I know that was long-winded, but
no, the answer was actually really perfect. And I want to actually highlight a few things that you said. So through that, you mentioned the fact that you were going through like a lot of different coaches, and you were using like originally a lot of these external sources until you realized like it was like you had to go within, like, right? You have to go within yourself. And I'm pretty sure some of the coaches did mention that you have to go within. So, and it's like once you went within, you're like, wait, I'm attracted to these coaches and I keep going to these coaches because that's, I see where I want to be. And so it wasn't more so that you needed like, the coaching was definitely helpful, and it wasn't only that you needed to be coached. It was the idea, it was the fact that like you were attracted to coaching because you are a coach. And so, understanding like the dynamics of that, I think is really important. And so just like in individuals, like their everyday life, we have to not only see where we want to go or see what we want to be, but just also being open to the idea that you know, you attract what you want. Like you attract, like once you have your mind in the right place, like the things that you want will just kind of fall into your life, and you might not see them the way they're, you know, the way they're supposed to be. Like if you look at, you know, I don't know, I know. So I have Apple on my decks. I listened to a talk by what's it called? It was an interview with Oprah and Bishop TD Jakes, and he was talking about Apple. So he was saying, like, you know, when people look at like apples and like, you know, they were looking like the people were looking at these bunch of apples, and the apple was just like, I know I'm not meant to be an apple, I'm meant to be an orchard, right? And so people are just like, what do you mean it's supposed to be an orchard? You're just an apple. But it's like, in order to become the orchard, like the apple had to cut, like you have to cut to the core, because it's like the seeds within the apple is what's going to make the orchard. But if you're just so focused on the peel and the flesh and like all these external things, you're never going to be able to cut to the core. So that's like, that was really like profound when I heard that, because it's like we so often kind of hold in what's inside of us, and like, you know, we'll hang out with orchards, we'll go around orchards, but we're not, and we feel, and it's until we realize, oh shoot, that's because I am an orchard. Let me cut to the core, open up what needs to be opened up. And like once you unleash that, now, you know, if we keep on with the apple analogy, you're feeding hundreds of thousands of people, whereas the one apple, when you throw away the seeds, one apple could just feed one person, maybe two if you want to be kind and cut it in half. So just really like understanding like that deeper essence of ourselves. And so when you committed to the coaching business, now what were some of the things that you started to do to set up like your coaching business and like set on your entrepreneurial journey? And then like after that, I wanted to talk to a little bit of like, how did you get rid of like the voices that said, oh, you need more stability, oh, you need like a pension and all these fancy things? Like what did it take to kind of get rid of those voices?
Yeah. So it's, you know, like you hit on a really good point. It's going within. And I didn't realize that there were beliefs that I had about myself that was keeping me back, right? So beliefs that I needed to be a leader. I am a leader, right? But I needed to be in a certain environment to shine. Like, you know, because society says you have to be doing this. So I initially was doing those things and I enjoyed everything that I've done. But when I really went in and looked at it, was I doing it for me or was I doing it for somebody else, right? Once I realized I wasn't doing it for me, it was easier for me to kind of grapple with, okay, well, what's next? How do I shift my beliefs around, you know, my self-image, what people think of me and what I think people think of me and what I think about myself, right? Once I was able to shift that and go within and change my paradigms, my subconscious beliefs about certain things, then it became a little bit easier to understand why I was where I was and why I needed to grow into the person that I want to be, right? And it's really, and it's, the journey continues, man. And it's a spiritual journey. It's not just looking at, oh, I want to do that, let me go do that, because I've done that, right? It's a spiritual journey. It's going within, understanding that there is more to Simone, like there's a deeper connection to you, to the universe, basically, to higher forces, whatever we call it, you know, God, whatever we call it, right? There's something bigger than me that's pulling me in a direction, and I was saying no to it, and that's why I was suffering on the inside. And once I started listening to the voices, the little whispers, once I started listening, I realized that, oh, okay, that's easier. Before I was ignoring it, I would be walking in the school, in the hallways, right? Because as an assistant principal, you're patrolling the hallway. And I would literally be walking in the hallways. And I would be seeing myself on stage, like giving a talk, right? But not in a school system, right? Like on stage, like Lisa Nichols, I would see that, right? I would see myself giving talks and doing all these things. And once I started listening to the voice, then it became louder and louder and louder. So I had no choice but to listen.
And take action from it.
And take action. Yeah. And the process I went through Proctor and Gallagher. So Bob Proctor, like he has a different approach to coaching because it's more about spiritual development and inner work. And I think that helped me understand the bigness of the plan that the universe has for all of us. Yeah.
Love that. And you know, just respecting, right? Like one, discovering, and then two, respecting and embracing that bigger plan. So when you decide to start the business, let's talk about that, right? Like what's the first kind of things that you started to do? So you said to your wife, like, hey, I'm gonna become a coach. Did you go out and try to like get any like certifications, or how did you start getting your first clients? So like, let's talk about that early stage.
Yeah, so basically, when I went through, Proctor Gallagher for coaching, and I ended up becoming a coach for them. So I had to, it's like being a franchise, right? So I had to purchase like rights to their material to use their material to coach my clients, because that material was so profound for me and impactful. I wanted to use the same content basically to help my clients. So I kind of, purchased that, think about it. I'm not working. Income is not coming in, spending all my money. And then I'm like, oh, I want to do this. And now I have to spend more money in, becoming like a franchise or whatever, a consultant, to be able to use this material to coach people. So I went through that process. And basically what I did was I just started having events. Like I went on Eventbrite and I just started having like free events so people can come. I could share some of my stories and find out their stories to see how I could help them. And it started attracting people that way. And then I, started doing a little bit of Facebook. Then now I'm big into social media because before that I didn't even have an account on social media. Now I'm on social media like every day. So basically, having a lot of events, talking to people, contacting people that I know who might need help, just sharing my story of how I was suffering, living a life that I didn't want to live. And now I'm living the life that I want to. If this resonates with you and you're in a similar situation, let's have a conversation. So that's kind of how I started, basically, very simple. Because before that, when I wanted to start a different business, I had spent a lot of money with websites and all these people and all these different things and design and just external things. And that really didn't pan out for me. So I decided this time around to just start small and to kind of connect with people on a humanistic level, basically.
That is amazing. And so now I would like to ask you, what is an adventure or something that you've experienced that you think is one of your biggest entrepreneurial misadventures? So this is something that really did not go according to plan, and something that maybe have caught you super off guard and really unexpected as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. So what could you share like a story or a time that happened?
Sure. Yeah. So initially investing in a business that you believe will be your business, you're passionate about it. And right before I really got into this coaching, I spent a lot of money. I had all these people helping me doing all these things. And I thought I was going to have this amazing curriculum that I'm going to sell to schools. I'm going to make millions of dollars.
I already hear it. That alone, you could have just ended it there, and that would have been enough.
Exactly. And then it just, I was just like, no, that's not happening. Because you know what? I think I didn't have the right mindset. I think it comes down to mindset. And even though intellectually, I'm pretty smart, but my beliefs and my paradigm and, the mindset is 95% is mindset, right? I didn't have the right mindset. So because of that, things just fell flat, right? And I didn't feel good about continuing, even though I spent all this money. I was just like, you know what? That's okay. This is a lesson learned, Simone. It's not a failure. You learned a lesson. Now you can step into something else, something that you're truly meant to do. Because I think I was still fighting this whole education thing where I had to be in education. I had to be this person. And, I had my foot in there, and it was just time to just take your foot out, girl, and just do what, you're being called to serve in a different way. And I just had to listen to the voice. And once I did that, I felt emotionally free, and all the financial part of it didn't matter because emotionally I was free. And I know that all that money is coming back because that's how, energy works, right? It comes all right back. So that was my big misadventure.
And I think what I want to highlight from that is just like letting go to kind of gain more in the future. And there was a quote, because I have like this momentum dashboard thing that every time I go on like Chrome is like a new quote every day. And there was a recent quote by Marilyn Monroe. It was just like letting go of the good to like and I'm paraphrasing this terribly wrong, but hopefully you guys get the point. But it's like letting go of good to then open up and accept the great, right? Letting good things fall apart so great things will fall together. And I think that's word for word what it said. And I was just like, wow, like that is true, because if you hold on to something that's not well, right? If we think of like illnesses, right? Do we want to hold on to a cold, right? We have to go through the cold and say, I don't want this cold, let go of it, in order to then heal from the cold. We have to accept that this is a cold, this sucks, right? Now what can we do to get better? We don't want to keep going outside. We don't want to keep, working or staying up. We want to rest. We have to let go of that thing in order to get better and get through and heal from it. And I think so many people are so stuck up on, and I've experienced this multiple times, where you get stuck up on the idea of what you should be instead of what you could be.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the sooner we let that go of like what people expect of us. And even just as last year, right, when I moved back from Georgia to New York, literally 3 days after I moved back, I was in a full-time job. And it was just like, because of that expectation, I felt like, I said I was never moving back to New York. I thought, I had like all my entrepreneurial things were coming through, and now it just felt like, wow, everybody was right. I kind of have to, and it's like, that's not it. It's just, at times you have to do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do, and you can do. And that doesn't mean anything about you or as a person. Like, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. And it doesn't mean that. And so just like letting go of like the expectations and the like the obligations that other people put on you, and figuring out, okay, what really matters to me. And like, I love how you keep talking about like your kids, and how do you think, and this is like leading into my next question, like how do you think being like a mom has impacted your entrepreneurial journey? And if you don't mind, like, how old are your twins?
Yeah, so my twins are 6 years old, and I think for me too, my son has some unique needs. Like he has some special needs. So being an entrepreneur, I think is very it's perfect for having kids, because I have a flexible schedule. When the school called, if he, like he was sick, I was able to go to school, pick him up, and take care of him. When I was in my assistant principal job, it was difficult to leave the school.
Yeah, you can't just leave them.
Yes, like, I'll be back, my kid's sick, right? It was difficult to do that. So I think, really doing this work is a lot easier for me with having my kids, because I could take my kids anywhere. I could, if my kid was here sick, I could still be on the phone with you, be on client calls, whatever it is. It's a lot easier. It's flexible. We could take calls from the park, right? So I think that was part of my biggest push to go back into that, right? To get back into being on my own and really modeling for my kids to really follow their hearts and doing the things that really move them. And I think my daughter at 4, almost 5, said to me, "Mommy, why do you have to leave the house so early in the morning?" And she, I was leaving like 6. I wasn't getting home till like 6, 7 at night. And one day she said to me, "Mommy, I want one more hug." And she was crying, and I couldn't, the tears, and I was running up. Yes. I had my coffee in one hand, my lunchbox, my bag, and I was running out the house. She's like, "One more hug." And she was bawling. And then she said, "Why can't you just have a job where you work on the computer from home?" And I was like,
"You're right."
I was like, yeah. I mean, that was just like, oh my God, the divine told my 4-year-old to tell me to like cut it out, right? Like, I mean, so yeah, that's really like listening to those little people in our lives. I think is the best way for me to explain this, is listening to my kids, listen to their wants, their needs, and then that helps me follow my heart, follow my desires and my dreams, and doing the things that is going to and is benefiting the entire family. So I think it's a balance always, being a mom is always a balance, and it's never perfect, right? I accept help, right? I accept help. I get a babysitter to help me when I need to. I accept the help because I can't do it all. My wife is amazing. She's very helpful and supportive. So I'm not doing it alone. It's a village, right? People, it's a village.
Yeah, so true, so true. And I love that, the universe is like, oh, you ain't gonna listen to me? Watch what I
baby, tell her what she needs to do, right?
Yes.
And so the message did come through a different vessel, but it came through and you got it. And now, you have your business. So that's really great. And so we're coming to the end of our interview. And the question that I usually ask at the end is like, what information or task or homework would you like to leave the audience? Like, what would your last piece of advice be, in the unfortunate event they got nothing from this interview, which I know that's not possible, but in the case, right, what would you like to leave them with as like a message to keep going and, some piece of advice or thing to do?
Yeah, sure. So I would
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Doing the Most. Catch us here next week, same time, same place. If you can't wait, head on over to doingthemost.xyz to stay connected. Until next time, keep on doing.